Good evening, dear friend. Tonight, I'll share a story about power, decisions, and the unexpected moments that reshape our world. A story that begins in a quiet room where history was waiting to be written. The clock on the White House wall read 10:43 p.m. 3 minutes until a decision that would shake two nations. Inside the dimly lit Situation Room, President Donald Trump sat surrounded by advisors, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of large screens. Maps of Venezuela covered the walls, marked with red circles around Caracas. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. Outside the window, the January night was still and quiet, just another evening in Washington, D.C., or so it seemed to the sleeping city. Trump leaned forward, his fingers steepled. Before him lay photographs of a compound in Fort Tayuna, where Venezuela's leader Nicolas Maduro would be sleeping within hours. The quiet typing of aides filled the space. A single sheet of paper rested on the mahogany table, just one page that could alter thousands of lives. 3 minutes. The clock's ticking seemed louder now, a steady heartbeat counting down to midnight. Most Americans had no idea what was unfolding in these hidden rooms of power. Families watched television. Couples shared late dinners. Students studied for morning exams. Life continued normally while history prepared to pivot. In Venezuela, the streets of Caracas were quiet too, bathed in the warm yellow light of street lamps. Children dreamed peacefully in their beds. This would be the last ordinary night. The president glanced at the clock again. 10:45 p.m. The weight of the coming choice settled on his shoulders like an invisible cloak. He had faced many difficult decisions before, but none quite like this. None that would cross so many boundaries, break so many rules of how nations interact. The world was about to change, but only a handful of people knew it. This was not just another midnight meeting. This was the beginning of something new, something that would force all of us to question what we believe about power, justice, and the price of action. And it all started with a clock ticking down to zero. 6 months earlier, no one imagined this moment would come. In June 2025, the world watched as Venezuela held its presidential election. Lines of citizens waited patiently in the hot sun outside polling stations across Caracas. Many hoped this would be a turning point after years of hardship. But when the results were announced, showing Nicolas Maduro again as the winner, protests erupted in the streets. Rain fell that evening, washing away tear gas, but not the disappointment on people's faces. In Washington, President Trump sat in the Oval Office reviewing diplomatic cables. His advisors had spent weeks discussing Venezuela through official diplomatic channels. Formal communications between governments. Diplomatic channels means the proper, respectful ways countries talk to each other. But these talks were going nowhere. On his desk lay reports describing the growing humanitarian crisis, when ordinary people lacked food, medicine, and basic necessities. Children in Venezuelan hospitals had no antibiotics. Families stood in line for hours just to buy bread. This humanitarian crisis was getting worse each month. Trump turned on the television. News channels showed images of Venezuelan refugees walking across borders into Colombia and Brazil, carrying only small bags of belongings. "We need to do something," he told his national security advisor. But what? Economic sanctions had failed. Quiet diplomacy had failed. The room felt heavy with the weight of unsolved problems. Then in August, a different kind of report landed on the president's desk. This one came from intelligence sources, not diplomats. It contained photographs and documents suggesting Maduro personally controlled a powerful drug organization called Cartel de los Sols. Late one night, Trump studied these pages carefully. His coffee grew cold beside him. If true, this changed everything. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about international crime. For the first time, military options were discussed in serious terms. Maps of Venezuela appeared in secure meeting rooms. Generals presented possibilities. But Trump hesitated. American presidents don't simply invade other countries to arrest their leaders. The idea felt extreme, almost impossible. During one meeting, he paced slowly behind his chair. "Sometimes the easy path isn't the right path," he said quietly. "And sometimes the right path isn't the legal path." The president looked out his window at the Washington Monument, standing tall in the distance. He thought about American values, international law, and those children in Venezuelan hospitals. The complexity of the situation pressed on him like a physical weight. His advisors waited silently for his decision. What happened next would force a president to consider an option no American leader had ever chosen before. The legal memo arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in red security tape. Inside the White House, Counselor Pat Cipollone placed the document carefully on the president's desk. "This is from 1980, sir," he explained. "It outlines how a president can use military force to apprehend international criminals." Trump ran his finger along the worn edges of the paper. The memo's yellowed pages contained arguments no president had ever tested in modern times. That evening, the Situation Room filled with tension. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien leaned forward. "The legal theory is sound, Mr. President, but politically unprecedented." Secretary of State Mike Pompeo countered. "The Venezuelan people have suffered enough. Maduro isn't just a bad leader. He's a narco-terrorist." Trump listened silently as his advisors debated. Some warned of international backlash. Others argued that diplomatic options had failed. "What you're describing is essentially a decapitation strike," one general said quietly. For those who don't know military terms, a decapitation strike means removing the head of a government quickly and completely. The room fell silent after these words. Trump studied the faces around him. Some showed worry, others determination. He thought about American values, the balance between law and justice, between restraint and action. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the law creates boxes too small for real problems." His advisors exchanged glances. No one had expected these words. Meanwhile, far from Washington, military preparations began. In Florida and Puerto Rico, Special Forces units received new orders. Ships moved quietly on radar screens in the Caribbean. Helicopters were modified for low-altitude night flight. All this happened while diplomats continued normal talks with Venezuela, maintaining the appearance of routine relations. One morning in October, Trump paused during his daily intelligence briefing. On the screen were images of Venezuelan refugees. Children with hollow eyes, mothers carrying everything they own in plastic bags. Their faces haunted him. That afternoon, he called his team back to the Oval Office. The cautious deliberation that had characterized previous meetings shifted. His voice became firmer. "We've waited long enough," he said. "If we believe what we say about American values, we can't just watch this happen." By November, the operation had a name, a plan, and a timeline, but no final approval. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford arrived in Caribbean waters on December 1st, 2025. From satellite images, it looked like a small city floating on the deep blue sea. Its deck buzzed with activity as fighter jets were positioned for rapid deployment. Ships from the American fleet gradually formed a silent circle around Venezuela's coastline, like dominoes falling into place, each vessel taking its position without fanfare. By mid-December, over 30 military vessels patrolled the waters, their presence hidden beneath routine naval exercises announced to media. Meanwhile, diplomatic relations unraveled. "You," officials quietly revoked the diplomatic passports of key Venezuelan officials. Embassies exchanged formal complaints that grew increasingly heated. At a press conference on December 15th, President Trump made a statement that surprised even his closest advisors. The United States does not seek regime change in Venezuela, he said firmly, looking directly into the cameras. Our interest is solely in bringing international criminals to justice. Those words would later haunt his administration, creating a gap between public statements and private actions that critics would call deception. Yet in the Situation Room that night, Trump explained to his team, sometimes you must speak to the world while preparing for reality. Inside Fort Tayuna in Caracas, Nicolas Maduro remained unaware of the growing net around him. Intelligence reports showed him growing increasingly isolated, trusting only a small circle of guards who never left his side. American surveillance teams, operating from neighboring countries, tracked his movements with growing precision. They monitored his late-night phone calls, his favorite restaurants, even the specific bedroom he slept in each night. We need final confirmation, Trump would say repeatedly during briefings. I want final confirmation before we proceed. His advisors understood the weight behind those words. This wasn't just operational caution, but the moral burden of knowing lives would be lost. Christmas came and went with unusual tension in both capitals. While families exchanged gifts and attended midnight services, military planners worked around the clock. Then, on December 28th, the breakthrough arrived. A trusted source inside Maduro's security detail provided exact details of the president's New Year's Eve schedule, including the precise layout of his private quarters. The intelligence team verified the information through multiple channels. This is final confirmation, the CIA director told Trump. We have final confirmation of his location. Trump studied the photographs of Maduro's family. His wife Celia, his children, grandchildren he rarely saw. In that moment, the abstract operation became painfully human. All that remained was one phone call that would change history. The Special Forces team had trained for this exact moment for 117 days. In a hidden base in Puerto Rico, Delta Force operators sat in a dimly lit hangar, checking their gear under red safety lights. Sergeant Marcus Cole ran his fingers across the cold metal of his rifle grip, the familiar texture calming his nerves. Outside, the tropical night air hung heavy and damp, carrying the distant sound of waves against the shore. Each soldier moved with quiet precision, their movements practiced 1,000 times. Stay focused. Their commander had told them during the final briefing. Stay focused on the mission. By midnight, over 150 aircraft prepared for takeoff from 20 different locations across the Caribbean. Fighter jets, stealth helicopters, and surveillance drones waited silently on runways. The operation required perfect coordination, like a symphony where every instrument must play at exactly the right moment. From a command post aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, General William Harris monitored radar screens showing the developing formation. A sudden alert flashed red. Venezuelan radar had detected something unusual near their northern coast. For 3 tense minutes, the entire operation held its breath. Then the alert disappeared. Just a fishing boat, not a threat. But the close call reminded everyone how thin the margin for error truly was. As the helicopters lifted off from their forward bases, a light rain began to fall, glistening on the aircraft wings under moonlight. Inside the lead helicopter, Captain Rodriguez adjusted his headset and whispered final instructions to his team. Equipment malfunctions had delayed 3 aircraft, forcing last-minute adjustments to the flight plan. Rodriguez thought about his father, who had served in Vietnam. Power without wisdom is just noise, his father had told him years ago. Now, flying toward a foreign capital in the dead of night, those words echoed in his mind. Was this mission wisdom or just noise? The formation crossed the Caribbean Sea at just 100 feet above the water, invisible to most radar systems. Below them, the dark ocean stretched endlessly. Inside each aircraft, soldiers maintained their professional focus, while personal doubts flickered briefly in their thoughts. Some wondered about the families they had left behind. Others questioned whether this action would truly help the Venezuelan people or simply create new problems. The rain intensified, tapping gently against the helicopter windows like quiet fingers. 2 hours into the flight, communication channels crackled with updates. All teams reported on schedule. Weather conditions remained manageable. The coastline of Venezuela appeared on navigation screens, growing closer with each passing minute. Inside the helicopters, final weapons checks were completed. Masks were secured. Each soldier took a deep breath, centering themselves for what came next. As they crossed the Venezuelan coastline, no one knew that Maduro's guards had been waiting for them. At exactly 2:17 a.m. Caracas time, the first helicopter touched down in Maduro's garden. The blades whipped the night air into a frenzy, showering the compound with leaves and dust. Captain Rodriguez jumped from the aircraft before it fully settled, his team following in perfect formation. Gunfire erupted immediately, sharp cracks that shattered the stillness of the sleeping neighborhood. "Move! Move! Move!" Rodriguez shouted over the din inside the White House Situation Room. President Trump watched the live feed on multiple screens. His knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the table. Every explosion in Caracas seemed to echo in the silent room. "Status," he demanded. An aide reported. "Team Alpha is at the main entrance, sir." "Heavy resistance." Trump nodded tightly. "Give them what they need." He authorized additional helicopter support without hesitation. The Special Forces team advanced through Maduro's compound with practiced efficiency. Glass shattered as they breached the main doors. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing expensive furniture and artwork. Shouts in Spanish came from upstairs, guards mobilizing. 2 team members fell wounded but were quickly pulled to safety. The remaining soldiers pressed forward, clearing room by room. Each step brought them closer to the second floor where intelligence confirmed Maduro slept. Back in Washington, Trump paced slowly behind his chair. He thought about the faces of Venezuelan refugees he'd seen in those intelligence reports. Children without medicine, mothers searching for food. The moral weight of his decision pressed on him. Is this justice, he wondered silently, or just power? The screen showed his team reaching the stairs leading to Maduro's private quarters. Inside the compound, Rodriguez paused outside the master bedroom door. His hand hovered over the handle. Through the wood, he could hear muffled voices, Maduro and his wife, unaware of what was coming. Rodriguez noticed a photograph on a small table nearby, a much younger Maduro and Celia Flores on their wedding day, smiling under a bright sun. For a fraction of a second, he saw not a dictator, but a man who had once been happy. Then the moment passed. "Breaching now," he whispered into his radio. The door exploded inward. Bright lights flooded the room. Nicolas Maduro sat upright in bed, his eyes wide with shock. Celia Flores pulled the covers to her chin, her face pale in the sudden brightness. The room smelled of expensive cologne and night air. Through an open window, 2 guards rushed from an adjoining room, but were quickly subdued. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Mr. President, you're coming with us." Maduro's expression shifted from surprise to fury. "You have no right," he shouted in Spanish, reaching for a phone on his nightstand. A soldier intercepted his hand. In that tense moment, with weapons raised and a nation's fate hanging in the balance, Trump made his final decision from thousands of miles away. What he ordered next would determine whether this mission ended in capture or tragedy. Part 7. The photograph that changed everything. The photograph that would define the operation showed not a victory, but a question. Taken by a Navy photographer aboard the USS Yuma at dawn, it captured Nicolas Maduro sitting quietly on the ship's deck. He wore the same gray suit from his bedroom raid, now wrinkled and stained. In his hands, he held a small photograph of his grandchildren. His expression wasn't anger or fear, but deep sadness. A man who had lost everything while the rising sun painted the ocean gold behind him. This single image would circle the globe within hours, changing how millions viewed what America had done. Back in Caracas, the streets remained eerily quiet. Contrary to American intelligence predictions, no crowds gathered to celebrate Maduro's removal. Instead, families locked their doors tighter. Shopkeepers closed their windows. Soldiers stood uncertain at their posts, unsure who to obey now that their commander was gone. The power vacuum created immediate chaos, looting in some neighborhoods, spontaneous gatherings in others, and a growing fear that without strong leadership, Venezuela might collapse into civil war. The humanitarian crisis didn't end with Maduro's capture. In many ways, it deepened. President Trump watched these developments from the Oval Office. News channels flashed global reactions like strobe lights on his face. Russia and China condemned the operation as illegal aggression. European allies expressed concern about precedent. Even traditionally friendly nations questioned America's right to arrest another country's leader. Trump scrolled through his tablet, seeing images of Venezuelan refugees who had hoped for liberation but now faced even greater uncertainty. His chief of staff entered quietly with coffee. "Sir, the UN Security Council is calling an emergency session." Trump nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he murmured, "you do what you think is right, only to discover the world is more complicated than you imagined." That evening, alone after his staff departed, Trump sat by the window, watching the Washington Monument lit against the night sky. He thought about the wedding photo he'd seen in Maduro's bedroom, the young couple smiling under a bright sun. Was this justice or just a different kind of war? The mission had succeeded tactically, but failed to deliver the clear victory he'd envisioned. American forces remained in Venezuelan airspace, not as liberators, but as occupiers in the eyes of many. The unexpected consequence of removing a dictator wasn't freedom, but uncertainty, a reminder that power carries responsibility far beyond the moment of capture. As dawn broke over Washington, Trump made a quiet decision. He would bring American troops home within 30 days, leaving Venezuelans to determine their own future. Sometimes the hardest choices aren't about winning battles, but knowing when to step back. The operation had answered one question, while raising many more about America's role in a changing world. Let me tell you this story again more simply. Sometimes a story is like a river. We must see it twice to understand all its currents. In January 2026, President Trump sat in the White House Situation Room. The clock showed 10:43 p.m. He had 3 minutes to decide whether to send American forces to capture Venezuela's President Maduro. This was not a normal decision. No American president had ever done this before. 6 months earlier, Venezuela held an election many called unfair. A humanitarian crisis grew worse. People lacked food and medicine. Then American intelligence found evidence linking Maduro to drug trafficking. Trump's advisors debated a secret plan, using a 1980 legal memo to justify a military operation to arrest Maduro as if he were a criminal, not a president. Military preparations began quietly. Ships moved to the Caribbean. special forces trained for the mission. Trump made public statements saying America wasn't seeking regime change, while privately planning exactly that. The decision weighed heavily on him. He saw images of Venezuelan children suffering and wondered if waiting longer meant more lives lost. On the night of January 2nd, Trump gave the final order. Over 150 aircraft took off from bases across the Caribbean. Helicopters flew just 100 feet above the water, invisible to radar, their target. Maduro's compound inside Fort Tayuna in Caracas. At 2:17 a.m., American forces landed in Maduro's garden. Gunfire erupted. They fought their way to his bedroom. There they found Maduro and his wife, startled awake. Despite resistance, they captured him and flew him to the USS Yuma. The world reacted with shock. Russia and China condemned the action. Even American allies questioned its legality. In Venezuela, no celebrations followed Maduro's capture. Instead, fear spread as the country faced a dangerous power vacuum. Trump realized something important that morning. Removing a bad leader doesn't automatically bring good leadership. Sometimes power creates more problems than it solves. The mission succeeded, but peace remained distant. True leadership isn't just about making bold choices. It's about understanding their consequences long after the moment passes. This lesson echoed beyond Venezuela, reminding us all that actions ripple further than we can see. I was there for every difficult moment of this decision. My name is James Wilson, and for 3 years I served as White House Chief of Staff. In my pocket, I still carry the coffee-stained notepad from that night, the one where I scribbled, "Is this right?" in the margins while the president made his choice. I saw the weight on President Trump's shoulders grow heavier with each passing month. During those late-night meetings, after most advisors had left, he would sometimes sit silently at his desk, staring at photos of Venezuelan children. I brought him coffee in paper cups that grew cold while he thought. One evening in November, he looked directly at me and said, "James, what would your father have done?" My father was a small-town mayor who believed leaders serve people, not power. I didn't know how to answer. I worried constantly as the operation unfolded. While special forces crossed the Caribbean Sea, I sat alone in the Situation Room, watching the clock. My hands trembled slightly when I held the operation order. I called my wife 3 times at night just to hear her voice. Each time I hung up, the silence of the White House felt heavier. I hoped we were doing the right thing. Everything changed for me after we spoke with Maria Rodriguez, a Venezuelan mother whose son had died waiting for medicine. Her tears on that video call stayed with me long after the screen went dark. She didn't care about politics. She cared about whether her other children would survive. In that moment, I understood this wasn't about removing a leader. It was about the responsibility of power to protect the vulnerable, even when it costs you something. When I saw Maduro's photograph aboard the USS Yuma the next morning, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the complexity of our world pressing down on my chest. True leadership isn't about winning battles. It's about creating conditions where peace can grow. As dawn broke over the Potomac River, I watched the president stand alone by the window. His reflection in the glass showed not a victor, but a man carrying the weight of his choices. The responsibility of power isn't about the action you take, but the peace you create afterward. That's what I learned in those dark hours. That's what I carry with me still. Part 10. The quiet wisdom of stories as English learners. We study stories not just for language, but for wisdom. The tale of that January night in 2026 teaches us something deeper than vocabulary or grammar. It reminds us that our world is woven together by countless choices, some made in quiet rooms, others on battlefields, but all connected by their consequences. Like the characters in our story, each of us faces moments where we must choose between what is easy and what is right, between what serves ourselves and what serves others, between immediate action and patient wisdom. These choices echo beyond the moment, touching lives we may never meet. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is listen before we act. Sometimes it is to act when others hesitate. There is no simple formula, only the difficult responsibility of weighing each choice carefully. True leadership isn't measured by the battles we win, but by the peace we create afterward. I hope this story has given you not just practice with English words and phrases, but also a moment to reflect on your own journey. Perhaps you faced a difficult decision recently, or maybe you're facing one now. Whatever your choice, may it come from a place of courage and compassion. If this story helped your English and made you think, please give this video a like. It helps others find these stories too. In the comment below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What difficult choice have you made that taught you about responsibility? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps us all learn together. If you'd like more stories like this one, please subscribe to our channel. Every week, we share new tales designed to help you practice natural English while touching the human experiences we all share. You can also find transcripts and vocabulary notes in the description below to help with your learning. Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember, every word you learn gives you more power to understand our complex world and to make your own choices with greater wisdom. Until next time, keep listening, keep speaking, and keep choosing with your heart. Good night and sweet dreams.